That's great. Now I'm recording it. That's great. Cool. And I'll send you the file afterwards, of course.
Thank you very much.
So great. So then now I feel like I have to be more formal. I'll pretend to be formal for a little while. No, but the idea was really, as I said before, is that we'll try it, like a taste of how we would run a workshop. But just a taste, we can't go into deep methods. And usually we'll go outside, of course, and meet with people we don't know. We push people to do that, and that's not going to happen today. So today we're just going to play with the skills. I'll talk a little bit about the background, and then we can all discuss, like, how can this be used in different settings, if that's okay with you. We plan for no more than 90 minutes, but we'll see how long it takes and so on. It also depends a little bit on what you find interesting, and let's have an interactive session throughout, even though I felt like perhaps I just show some slides just to kind of guide the process a bit, but feel free to just like jump in. And I thought also that we'll do a little presentation around as part of the workshop. So I'm not forgetting that. I'm really curious to know more about all of you. So it's just to get us started, and we'll do that as part of the workshop. We usually do that. If that's okay, I'll start the slides. And as I said before, Pierre is going to help. And we have been working together for a few years now, I guess. Time goes by quickly. Here's the slide, the first slide. And there you also see the website where you find a little bit more material. Should be more though. One day it will come, but there's some there. And the way there are, just to start it off, I would say when we talk about bubble hopping, it depends a little bit on in what context we are. And it's a little bit like you can kind of tailor it and suit it to depending on the context. So the one I was running this week, I was really framing this as bridging differences. But other times I might be, if I'm, for example, in an organization and they want to connect between different departments or something, I will perhaps rename it as bursting silos. If it's more on a personal development, individual level, I could use things like just kind of understanding the other or something like that. So it's a little bit like bubble hopping, and then you can kind of put the topic that suits the context under it. But today I went for bridging differences because that was what I was talking about the other day. And the agenda for today, I felt maybe this is just a little bit about the method, then presentation round, but we'll do that as an exercise, a little bit about the theory behind, and we practice some skills together, and then we just have a discussion around it. And what I should say is, like, the whole idea is that it's very flexible the whole time. So for example, when it comes to theory behind, if I teach at the university, which I do, and I will introduce myself also later, if I teach at the university, I might put a lot of theories in there because they need some academic points, etc., etc. If I teach within an organization, I might barely have any theory at all. Same thing with skills. Like if I have plenty of time, I'll go into many different kind of skills. And I run a 10-week course, for example, where we practice a lot of skills, and we put in 10 weeks of skills training, all different kinds. But if I run a short workshop like today, I'll use perhaps 3 of them. So it's like the whole idea is to make it really flexible and kind of you do it as it suits you. So, and I think that's an important point. The whole idea is also to think that, the difficult thing is not the concept as such. It's not so difficult to understand, but it's really what we really want is to get as many as possible to use it and talk to each other and bridge differences and, really kind of connect people. So easy to use and use it in your own way. That's like the whole idea behind. And so really feel free to do whatever with the information, to tweak it as you like. That's really the idea. And if you have any questions, just raise. I mean, maybe I might even see a hand, and Pierre is there and can help me. And otherwise, just scream out if there are any questions. Here's the background a little bit. Basic idea: connect with people unlike you. And that could be people have different opinions, come from different backgrounds, could be between countries, like right now, actually. Different beliefs, between religions, professions, as I said before, departments, really suitable to any kind of really difference. Somebody is unlike you, not in the same bubble, as I would say. And the idea is to find understanding in between, not to change people, not to change yourself necessarily, although perhaps you should be open to change yourself, but really to try to find some common ground and solutions and understanding. That's really the basic idea. And of course, there are boundaries. Sometimes my students, for example, will ask, so, should I really meet with somebody who's like against human rights, for example? And I always tell her, there are boundaries. You have to find them too. And what are your boundaries? It's up to you a little bit. So you decide that yourself. I've done it with around 1,300 people by now. And I've also collected 900 written stories that's right now in this massive program where I can search for words and try to code it, etc. So I'm really trying to do this as a research project as well. Mostly with students. They're the easiest in the sense that they have to do it and they're there and I can suit it into courses, but also a little bit with the organizations and outside and volunteers, and Pierre and I and our three colleagues have done it also with just random people who are interested. So a bit different. And usually we say that when we do it, we can see benefits. And we can see them on the individual level, the organizational level, and the societal level. And of course, they are also connected a bit, those three, but that's like a general idea. We can see it on all three levels. And now I saw that there are some things in the chat. So, yes, you can ask me questions. If I keep the chat open, I will be able to see the question. How are the students? Yeah, they have to do it. That's a good answer. They have to do it. It's easy. Like, I'm going to be like honest. Sometimes you get very open-minded people to do this if you do it on a volunteer basis. And you also like, if you, for example, like to have people from different, not different walks of life, because that's not the case with students necessarily, but at least with different opinions about things, or perhaps different political opinions, then students are good too, because you can kind of push everybody to take part of it. And that makes it really interesting. I have to say that sometimes I feel that some of those that are most negative in the beginning or skeptical of different reasons, they sometimes get the biggest benefits from doing it because they won't be doing it every day. And I've seen that with so many of my students. Skeptical in the beginning, and then they try and it's like, wow, it was really rewarding. So that's a good thing with students too. But thanks for asking. Keep on asking. I'm keeping the chat open, so I'll see the questions too now. So this is what I would do in university. I would say that bubbles, when I say bubble hopping, it's a light way of talking about something that's very serious. And if you want to put a more academic concept around it, I would say that when I talk about bubbles, I usually talk about social identities. And with social identities, I did even put up a little definition here. With social identities, I mean that, just moving around a little bit, a person's sense of who they are based on their group membership. So it's really about the groups we identify with ourselves, and that influences a lot. I'll come back a little bit to this. What's important to remember that we all have multiple social identities. Nobody's just in one bubble. Nobody has just one social identity. We all have multiple ones. And it's really important, especially when you meet somebody you might really disagree with, that it's so easy to put them into that category. But of course, they also belong to many. And sometimes we can find common ground between two of them and be really different when it comes to other bubbles. So, and now I say I, and of course Pierre is as much with me as I, but I'll use I anyhow, because I feel like I'm not sure that I should put everybody into the same bubble all the time. But when I do it, I really encourage to look for that common ground always. Okay, this person is really on the other side of the political spectrum, but perhaps there's something else you share. So look for that, because that opens up for discussions, and you find that little link connection, then the other ones might be easier to talk about. Important part. But let's move into a little bit more interactive. Do you have a paper and pen? I should have said that before. Everybody's nodding. That's like, this is not my students. They barely know what a paper and pen is these days, I think. But great. So a paper and pen, perfect, because I would like us to do a little short introduction round, but I would like us to do that as we present our bubbles. So I will start with mine, and then I will ask each one of you to sketch your bubbles kind of fast. So my bubble, my name is Emma, Stockholm, Sweden. I'm Swedish. I belong most of all to the academic bubble. That's where if I look at the time I spend, I think that's really spend a lot of time in the academic bubble. I do also have a little side bubble, that's a media bubble. I work as a columnist, and I'm a TV hostess and things like that. A radio show, talk shows and stuff like that. But academia is my main, media is my second kind of work bubble. I also have a big interest, and I spend quite a bit of my research about arts, performing arts, but circus, dance quite a bit. When it comes to values, if I look around my friends, I tend to have friends that politically tend to be in the center. I don't have so many that have very extreme views, I realize. A little bit centrist looking around my bubbles, and I think I identify with that. Also quite cosmopolitan, global, international perspectives. I have a little bubble in Montreal, that's the MTL, Montreal, Canada, where I've lived, and I've been going back and forth for 30 years a bit. And I sometimes feel like I'm a little bit a different person there, perhaps because I changed language. I speak French instead of English or Swedish. And I show other sides of myself. It's not like I'm another person, but there are other sides to that. And then I have my gym bubble, and that's kind of separated from all other bubbles. That's me. What about you now? What about if you draw, I said 5 minutes, that's perhaps a little bit much, but if you were sketch your bubbles, and then we take a short introduction round, one minute each with your bubbles. And that's how we get to know each other too a little bit. So draw your bubbles.
So just for clarity, in native language, okay? Is that okay?
As long as you talk about it in English, that's fine, absolutely.
Значи, ги цртаме своите бабли како нема што кажа, каде припаѓаме се, пошто кажа дека може би не припаѓаме само на еден бабл. и потоа ќе го образложиме како она што тоа го правеше. How does Macedonian sound like, Pierre? You're muted. Does it sound like being on mute for you? Just kidding.
It's true, I'm muted. It sounds not exactly like the muted. No, it sounds nice. Continue, please. I want to hear more of it.
Let's draw our bubbles and then you'll see more of it. You'll hear more. Thank you, Emma.
Nice.
Should we write in the chat about our bubbles?
Emma, you are muted.
Paper.
Yes, you could just show a paper to the screen too. I turned off the slideshow now, so we'll be able to see each other's slides.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be neither, it's not an arts exhibition here, even if I said I was interested in arts, but just sketch them. So in 1 minute, we'll introduce ourselves through our bubbles. Okay, that was the minute. Are you ready to go? Yes. Yeah, since should you start off and then you just pass it on to somebody else?
Gladly, and I hope we can read something of it. I don't have any proper paper here, so let me see if we're getting somewhat close to being. Let me know when it's close enough for you to read.
You can pin Pierre's window. Everybody can pin it.
Yeah, that's true.
Better. Yeah,
That's true. I'll do that.
Very good point.
Good point. Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
Where is it now?
So, okay. Can you see some of the bubbles? Is it possible to read? Otherwise, I just read it out to you. So I put like Berlin millennial. That's like, I don't know, I feel that to some extent that is one of my social identities, or it feels very bubbly at least. I don't know, like a certain, it's kind of like an identity around it. It feels like almost a very kind of homogeneous group of people. They can be very diverse in terms of which countries they come from and so on, but there's kind of almost a set of interests that goes with it, and a set of values to some extent. That's what why I put liberal green next to it also. Not sure whether that's readable, but I'm just reading it out. And yeah, for me, kind of linked with that is also I work with social impact and economics to some extent, or applied economics if you want, and organizational development. So that's all kind of a little bit like overlapping bubbles in a way. And then there's also my hiking bubble, and sort of fitness as another thing, and eating healthy and all that kind of stuff. It makes me smile because it's a bit stereotypical, but that's exactly what it is. Dancing is also one, and then kind of, I don't know, international, and with that kind of linked also like traveling. It's kind of like all kind of overlapping bubbles and parts of my identity. Not necessarily that I completely define as those bubbles, that not, but it's with a smile. It defines quite well which bubbles I'm part from, I think. So cool. I'd like to pass it on to Emma with one M.
Thank you very much. So this is my bubble, or bubbles. I'm not sure if you can see it.
A little bit. Yeah.
But I can read it also. Okay, my bubbles says that I have a creative side, and it's the biggest bubble from them all. I love building a relation with other people, but I also need alone time, like me time. I'm a nature lover. I love hiking. I'm very into personal growth. I love working out, and I love cooking and health eating.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you. And you can pass it on to somebody else, so we let it go.
Okay, I pass it on to Neshko.
Of course you will, because you don't want me to keep me for the end, right? Наш проблем с интернетът. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I just needed my time. How did you say it, Emma?
Me time.
Me time. Sorry. Okay. So I will first say that one thing that kind of hit me, Emma, while you were speaking, is that actually we do belong to many bubbles. This is something that it's strange for me now when I say it, but I didn't see it because I always thought there are globally 3 bubbles: institutions, businesses, and civil society sector, and that's it. But now I can see that, yeah, I do belong to more than one bubble. Here's my sketch, I don't know. Well, so the biggest bubble that I feel, that I feel a part of is the awareness bubble. It means yoga and meditation, which contains, which starts my day every day. And there are people that belongs to that bubble. And then I build up by saying that it's, not with that finger, dialogue circle bubble. I'm sorry for this. So dialogue, this is something that I'm eager for, qualitative dialogue, So there are people that I can see in my surrounding with it, and connected with that is the U bubble. We are in a process of building a first Macedonian hub on U. I'm also a parent. And it's strange that I wrote this, but I felt that I'm part of the media bubble. Face to Face magazine is the media, but I'm not so involved in it. And it's strange that I thought of it as that. So the only connection, that's why I'm mentioning face-to-face, is the only connection to media is face-to-face magazine, but I kind of feel that I'm part of the media. I guess it comes from subconscious, meaning that all of us, especially today in these technological times, are media by itself, you know? So what we are, we broadcast, you know? So maybe that's why I wrote that. And of course, I'm part of the CSO bubble, civic sector bubble. Okay, that's me. Alexandra.
Okay. I have, I don't know how, maybe it will be, yeah, my bubbles are here, but yeah, I found few personalities in myself. One where I spend most of my time is doing research, data analysis, and shaping public policy. On the other hand, here I have another cluster, which is yoga, then healthy food enthusiast, and love of nature. And here I have another cluster, which is, I name it social and friends, social, where I have friends and family. And here I have restaurants enjoying different food, clubbing, dancing, wine and shots, travel, and here separately I have fashion, because I love beautiful clothes and seeing nicely dressed people. Yeah, this is like some of these are a little bit opposites, but I guess that's me.
Balance is the word that got to me when I heard you talking too. That must be balancing out well, those. Oh, lovely.
And I'm passing this to Maya.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you see this, but it's a lot of. First, do you hear me? Okay. There's a lot of circles here. I guess the biggest one is about social entrepreneurship and social impact and social innovations. That's what my focus interest is in this period. Then the second circle is about the content that is created by Harvard Business Review and World Economic Forum. I read about a lot of articles in those two magazines. The third circle is about face-to-face and public programs. What we work in public and in face-to-face. The fourth circle is about ULab, because it brings me a lot of consciousness that it's really important for me. Then the behavioral economics part that is connected with all those four circles, and that is really important for me in a more like an academical level. There is the I can find out innovations in startups. I read about this in this several months. It's really interesting topic for me, and I believe that it's a bubble. Vulnerable people and their work integration practices. Music, it's an important bubble for me, especially because the kind of music that I listen is not good for the people here in the office. Art and design bubble, again, it's important for me personally. And the nature and the sea bubble. I didn't mention the private ones about beer. Shout to Sandra.
That's lovely. Thanks, Maya. And I don't know if you noticed, but it wasn't Harvard Business Review, but it was an article from Harvard Business School coming out this week. I think it was on Tuesday or something, about actually executives that need to that live in bubbles and need to get out of the bubbles. Exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, they're full with how executives should change their behavior.
Yeah, really. Wonderful. Thank you. Point to next one.
I guess Magda.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can see mine. It starts like bubbles, but become flowers in the end. I don't know why, but something happened. Here in the middle, it's a social mentor. I don't know why, but I don't know how, but in the last period, it's totally identified with me because we are working in some program that is named social mentoring for working integration. And this is part of my job and I really love, and I start to live like this, and I start to identify myself like social mentor. Then it was traveling because I really want to travel. I was living in a few countries all over the Europe. I read Neshkovat is writing in chat. But now with pandemic, I really don't travel that often. Then I have to be honest, and I have to say that something like Sandra mentioned, fashion. I really like fashion, and I really think that it's a way to express myself. Then books. I really want to read books. I really don't have time in last period, but I'm doing my best to read wherever I have time. Then I am mom. I'm a really big animal lover. I try to help for every animal that I usually for street homeless animals, dogs and cats. Then I like music. I have my own music that I'm really worst singer, but I'm singing all the time. I don't care for others how this influence them, but especially in the car in the morning, this is my part of meditation. I don't do meditation like in this classic way. I am listening music all over the way to work in my car. It's not really popular music, but also I don't care. I feel good. So I think that yes, they are all my bubbles. Sure, it's something more. I think these 5 minutes, it was the first that come.
You can put some of your music in the chat because there's a music discussion going on in the chat. And you should come to Sweden, our new prime minister, and you share the name. Her name is Magda as well.
I was living in Sweden, in Trelleborg, for 1 year, and I really like Sweden, especially Malmö for shopping. Okay, then I will nominate Tina.
Thank you, Magda. I draw many bubbles. And now I will explain. In the middle, I started with the bubble of research and advocacy, and this bubble is connecting with management. And these two bubbles are also connected with employment or social mentoring that Magda mentioned. Social entrepreneurship is the second bubble, and the third bubble is social impact. It is that is a sphere that we are included in the past 5 years, and it is interesting. But for many of us, meditation and yoga is one of the bubble. I'm a parent. I also like hiking and swimming, connecting with nature, traveling, plants, arts. I also add books and publications. Books, I also want to read a lot, especially when I have free time. But our work is also connected with creating publications, and also we do publications, and also bubble of communication. Our work is connected with communication, and also we have our own magazine, the street magazine, Face to Face. Oh, hello, Annika. And that's it. I'm passing this to Ivana. Or Vircha. Ivana is not here.
Hello. So I'm the external bubble in this big bubble, but it was nice to see how many similar bubbles we all have. This is my bubble list, bubble drawing. It was simple until I realized I didn't put the one of the main bubbles, and that's the bicycle. So in the center of my, actually the bubble in which I spend most of my time is the communications bubble. That's why it's the biggest. And then come the professional bubbles of diplomacy, PR, social media, and media, and teaching as well, to some extent, not as Emma, but still. And then yoga and baking are the bubbles which are seemingly not connected to anything else, but they're a big part of my life. And fashion, music is also very important, but the overarching kind of bubbly bubble is the connecting bubbles, or matching bubbles together. Actually, that's one of my strongest points, and that's what I enjoy doing the most. So thanks all. And I don't know if Ivana is there to pass the ball on, or Annika maybe can make some bubbles for us. Because I see they have matching t-shirts with Alexandra.
Oh yes, I love stripes, obviously.
Oh, wow.
I actually thought you were the one person, you know.
That's so cute. That's amazing. I almost have to pin you just so we all can see you. Oh, no. I'll take away this one.
And
Wow.
just because Emma, Verce called Ivana. You do hear me, right? Yeah. So since Verce called Ivana, I will start with Ivana is in the bubble of people who doesn't want to speak in the groups. So she's, you know, muted with video.
That's
there was one point that she made while you were speaking that may give you, Pierre and Emma, the maybe a space to answer it, and maybe to bring some more clarity into what bubble actually means. So Ivana said, I never receive political or sport messages from Facebook. And I guess, she said, that what Facebook does is making bubbles out of our interests, right? So does bubble actually refers to us making social connections with somebody, or it just considers our interests, as we said, like yoga, etc. And we assume that there is a bubble that actually goes along with our interest.
Very good question, I think. It goes straight into how I think I'll move on. Pierre, if you want to add something, just jump in. But for me, that was really a question that totally went into where, you know, if I was running a workshop with students or outside school, I would start with doing this, drawing the bubbles, because it's also a way of getting into that questions. What are the bubbles really? But also a way, of course, of getting to know each other a little bit. And since we later want to push everybody out of their bubbles, because that's really the point with it, it's good to also know your bubbles or think about the bubbles. And it makes it easier when you have them sketched and drawn, but also because it raises that kind of questions, I think. So excellent question. From a theoretical point of view, now you can approach this in many different ways. I tend to do it a bit sometimes from an academic point of view. I would use, as I said before, social identity as like the way I would talk about bubbles. This is a great book that I put on the side here called The Power of Us, written by two people at New York University. It has a very like an easy way of introducing the science behind. tons of experiments, and we can discuss whether that's good or not. We're not going to do that today, but it's quite good, I think, as an introduction to social identities. And if you are, which I tend to be, leaning towards that, you would say that, you know, the groups we belong to, they're super fundamental. I put yoga, I should maybe have done that, but I practice yoga these days, but I wouldn't, for myself, I wouldn't perhaps not put it as a bubble anymore. A couple of years ago, I would have done that, because then I was much more in the yoga community. And I felt that it influenced more my life and my choices and my preferences. Today, I'm much more like I practice it for myself at home, but I kind of moved out of the yoga bubble. So it really depends, I think, on the relationship. You know, yeah, I think you can have yoga as a bubble. Definitely, absolutely. I know many people that belong to that bubble. But you can also perhaps not have yoga as a bubble and still practice yoga, to just give one example. And if you were to rely on the theory, which I tend to do, it's really interesting. This theory is just fascinating, because I think also sometimes we don't really understand how much these bubbles or groups influence us. I mean, first of all, how strong it is, that kind of urge to be in a group. Yeah, I was just experiencing that the other day myself. I was moving in between groups, my students' groups, when they were working together. And so we were kind of discussing things in different workshops they had put up themselves. And as soon as I moved into a new group, I was like, this is my group. That so easily to form it if we like create the right circumstances for it, but also easily to identify with another group. And I think that is like, to me, the psychology behind is really about also how can we bridge, you know, and how can we create groups that have very inclusive norms. That's what I work a lot with my students, where the differences becomes, oh, that's great, interesting. Let's bring out the differences in everybody. So it's also like I think it's a deep meaning behind the bubbles in that sense. And once I've said it before, but we belong to several or multiple. It's fascinating, the research behind. Scary though, it's the kind of research that gives you goosebumps when you read it, because it's like you realize that, oh, there are, yeah, I don't know if you know about all these experiments, but sometimes when you read them, you think this is not true. Can be like that. That depends, for example, how you perform on a test. It will depend on if you activate, for example, a math test. If you bring something with you that remind us women that we are women, something that's like a female association to, then we will perform worse than if we didn't bring that, because there's this stereotype that women are not as good as men at math. So, there are like lots of, if they, for example, they can have math questions, and if it's politically, you can have the same question, but if you put something that's a little bit politically tense, like in the US, they will ask about gun control, and people will actually have, even if you're good at math, you'll have much more difficulty finding the correct answer if you don't align with it in your political views. Tons of things like that, or like soccer teams. If you smell a dirty t-shirt and somebody says, oh, it's from your favorite team, well, then you don't think it smells so bad. But if they say it's from another team, it smells much worse. So these kind of social identities, and I like activating them, really impacts so much. So that's also why it's important, but also because you can very, very, I think, you know, connect in between what, like we do, or try to belong to different bubbles, look for different bubbles through media, for example. The question too, I'll come back to that other question that Ivana had was, so I think that that's one way of defining bubbles. Of course, there are others. To me, that is also about that we do have this. I love this slide, but maybe that's some kind of weird bubble to love slides, but but that we also have like some choices, especially if we have both like the stories we tell about society, but also in our leadership, if you have leadership roles or whatever we are in, you know, or we just like, you know, citizens, human beings, you know, the way we talk about things, we can actually choose between dividing groups against each other, or we can really talk about the bonding, which is great. That's the bubbles, the strong ties that we really belong to. But we can also really talk about and try to create structures for bridging between different bubbles. And bridging and bonding, of course, we can do both. There's tons of research about that too. So for example, one strand of research my colleagues are doing right now is that they look at immigrants in Sweden. And what they can see is that the bonding, what they call the bonding capital, is quite high, that people do actually have close families and close friends. And you know, there's like a bonding, there are bubbles, but the bridging capital is not as high as it should be if you want a resilient communities. So it tends to be kind of separated from some other communities. So you want to have both. I mean, the whole idea about bubble hopping is never to take away the bubbles. You know, I'm not going to leave my academic bubble. I was like, no way, I love it. Or whatever it is, you know, or my circus bubble, whatever it is. So it's not about taking away the bubbles. That's the bonding capital, but it's also about bridging and trying not to divide too much. And this, of course, goes on a societal level as well. We can see that among politicians around the world, that they can actually choose different paths here. The dividing, the bonding, or the bridging, and in organizations. I work a lot with managers and they do the same thing. So we work in an organizational perspective with that. That's another theory. For me, that's another, like social identity is an important strand. Social capital is an important strand. Of course, is also the whole idea about polarization, and especially affective polarization, where it's not just about having different views, it's actually about disliking the others. Which is called affective polarization, and thinking that our bubble is much better. That's also an important part. And this one, as you were saying, Ivana, the filter bubbles, of course, that's also very influential, that we, like Facebook, tend to put us also into bubbles, that we get the same, that all social media does that, and algorithms that actually create that polarization and also that kind of bubbles. And we need to perhaps bridge there as well, maybe very deliberate, because the algorithms don't always help us. So those are some of that, you know, I hope that was a little bit of an answer to the question, how we can also define bubbles. And we could have gone much deeper, but this is not an academic seminar, and I'm not going to do it right now, although I recommend to all these books, and I'd be happy to send more references if somebody, you know, many of you said you were interested in reading too. I'd be happy to share some references after also. But I think we should start practicing some skills too. So what we usually do is that we start with that, you know, presenting some, you do the introduction of the group, and we talk a bit about bubbles, what they are, and then if it's an academic course, I'll bring tons of theories in. If it's not, maybe not, don't bring in so many. And then we go into the skills practice, which is the fun part. The aim usually is that we practice the skills within the group, and then everybody kind of jumps out. So when I have, for example, my students now, on Wednesday, they were practicing the skills amongst themselves. And then now I'm pushing them out. So now next time they have to practice the same skills, but outside their bubbles. I see something in the chat. Now I lost it again. So maybe it's a question. So maybe I should read it. Social mentoring. Nope, that was long. That was Rammstein. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ivana. Thanks. Wasn't about Rammstein. Practice the skills. Pierre, do you want to take over for a while? Do you want to?
Yeah, gladly. Do you want to keep? Well, yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, the idea of skills is basically, you know, bubble hopping. In order to do bubble hopping, You could say it that way. You can make use of a couple of skills, or by bubble hopping, you can actually train a couple of skills that are really helpful on sort of a very individual level and on other levels in organizations and societal also. And we'll come to that a little bit later. Now we really want to dive into the specific skills and into really like practicing them to some extent. So Emma, if you want to go to the next slide. We want to start with the asking questions aspect, and you can even go to the next one. Let's dive right in. So there's a really funny game. Well, let's see if you find it funny. I find it funny, at least, to start with. And the idea is we'll give you a little bit of a demonstration. And the second, the idea is one person, you'll be in pairs. One person starts with a question, whatever that question is. And the other person, no matter what the impulse to answer, you're only allowed to answer with a question. And on and on it goes. And basically what expands is kind of a conversation or a process between the two of you that only consists of one question after another question, and try to maybe take a little moment to hear the question, and then see what resonates, and then you come out with another question. And before we send you off to breakouts, Emma, should we give it a little try to just briefly demonstrate what we mean by that?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
But what do you mean?
Oh, you got me there. What is the sense of meaning?
What is happening?
Why do you need to know what is happening?
Why do you ask all these questions?
Can you have a conversation just with questions?
Can you have a conversation without questions?
What happens if we stop asking questions to each other?
What happens if we stop?
Can we even stop?
Can we let the others in?
I think so. So you see, it can be a little bit tricky, and it's more like like try to be in an exploration mode. It's funny because you might feel like different impulses. I don't want to prime or bias you. You feel that in yourself, and try to stick to really just using questions. Emma, do you want to send us off into breakouts?
I am trying here. They're like it's not a super simple task, so I'm working on it.
Take your
because
time.
we have a few with them. I'm a little bit unclear, but
and until then, let me give the floor to any of you. You might have questions. Is the exercise clear before we head off into breakouts?
Otherwise, I think I managed to get 2, but it could be 3 people, and then that works as well.
That works too. If you want, you can stop the screen sharing for a moment, and then we see if anybody, I mean, you can come in by voice or just give me a little thumbs up if it's clear. I see a couple of thumbs. Okay, cool. Then whenever you're ready technically, then
I am ready. So 2 minutes. Only questions. And now I open the room.
Enjoy.
Good.
Why did I press that button by mistake?
Because you were tired of asking questions.
I guess so, yeah.
But you know what, next time one of you, because you are 3 in the room, I
We were
didn't know.
3, right?
So one of you could stay with me in the main room.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So, but
So-
we didn't know that because I didn't know who you were, because you have
I
2
know.
different.
and I'm logged in by 2 within 2 devices. So this
Exactly.
is
So I was a little bit
Yeah.
like I put you in 2 different ones, but maybe one of you, we'll talk about that. So then I can also participate, and then we'll be 2 in each. But maybe some of the other ones should do it. Alexander, one of those you left, Alexandra, or
Veritza, right? So yeah.
Nice.
Oh, this was very quick.
Yeah, it is because it also takes a bit of time to digest, I think, in the process. But yeah, how was it? Like, let's get a few flashes from everyone. What was your experience?
Can I begin?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, at the beginning I had like blockages. I couldn't get to any question, but through laughing we got deeper. Like the question actually lead us to some very good points. I was in group with Maya.
Nice, thanks. How was it? How was it for the rest of us? Anybody else wants to share? What was the experience like? What was
I tried
weird?
to answer the questions. I wasn't focused to ask the question in the beginning because we are not used to speak each other like that. Then in the middle of the time, I mean, after the first minute, then I start to make the dialogue like questions. And as Emma said, then I realize how big answers we get from the questions that I was with you, Pierre, in the breakout room. So it was a good experience.
Thanks.
Clementina and Veritza, why are your microphones unmuted?
Sorry.
Why did you leave the group?
Well, you can't get out of the question game anymore, it seems. It's dangerous. No, but yeah, anybody else would like to share the experience? We have time for one
Interesting
more, I think.
experience, because when you ask something, the person from the other side, you have some need to answer that question. And it was interesting because we are very focused. I was in group with Ivana, and on some way the next question was answer also, combination of answer and the next question. And it was very nice conversation. Ivana, what do you mean? Okay.
Taking a little coffee break there. That's totally fine. No, yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit of the experience. I think plenty of things can come up. It can be a little bit irritating also. It can be fun. It really depends, and every time it can be different in a way. But it's just a funny occasion to observe, you know, the different impulses that you have, and the irritation especially also, I think, to some extent. Right, with that being said, I'd like to move exactly to the next one, just to briefly share a little bit about questions, kind of like good questions, so to say, or some things to consider when we generally think about questions. So one thing that can be very important, especially if you want to engage in an open dialogue and actually try to, you know, learn something new. One thing that's important is to avoid loaded and leading questions. And maybe just to give a very brief example to flesh that out a little bit, a loaded question is one loaded with an assumption, and to be honest, we do that all the time, or many people. I think I don't know anybody who doesn't do it often unconsciously, but sometimes it's important to bear in mind. So, for example, something like, "Why don't you care when I tell you about my day?" I guess that's like an everyday sentence that can, happen in a lot of whatever friendships and partnerships. And the idea here is why is that actually loaded? The assumption is, maybe you get some idea that the other person is not really listening to you, and your interpretation is the person's not listening because they don't care. But actually it's an assumption, right? So you build the question already on the assumption as if it was clear the person doesn't care. And then you just ask like, why you don't care? So it could also be, if anything, it could also be whenever you put an assumption as if it were not at question anymore, and then you ask from that on. It can also be, why did you commit that murder? In a more like a court setting. That's also an important context for that. So we try to avoid to load a question and ask, so if we transform that question, why don't you care? When I try to tell you about my day, like it could be, it's a little bit like nonviolent communication, for example. So I have the impression that you're not really listening, and it gives me the feeling that you don't care. Why is that? Or is that true? And why is that, if so? So you can kind of transform or make your assumptions explicit. And that helps to be more in contact with the person and not to kind of throw assumptions on them. And then a leading question. A leading question is also, it's maybe an even easier context. For example, whenever you say, do you prefer the old or the improved recipe, right? There's an implicit valuation. So the old and new can be kind of neutral, but even that kind of maybe has already some implicit values in it. But if I say, do you prefer the old and the improved recipe, it's clear I'm actually hinting to the fact that one is improved, the other one must be a little bit bad. And it kind of, from a technical perspective, that just limits the openness of the answers I can get. And it also puts a little bit of pressure maybe on my on my interlocutor and the person that I'm talking with. And I mean, in some contexts it's totally fine, but again, in a bubble hopping context, that's something important to bear in mind, or when we actually try to find out something new. All right, the others are also very important, a little bit easier and quicker to go through. Exploring the why. This is something in bubble hopping that we find really important, especially when we find, that we really disagree on some points, on some opinions. And then, of course, it's also fine to agree where you disagree. No trouble with that. But sometimes it's also interesting to go a little bit deeper and to go beyond that, right? To try and understand why somebody has a certain view on something. Maybe it's because of some experience that they personally had, maybe some values that they have. And if that comes from a place of genuine curiosity, it can actually be, it can help to develop the conversation in a nice direction. And let me jump over one, the touching a deep meaning. That is also, for me, at least, quite linked to the exploring the why. If you really try to understand why somebody holds certain views, that allows them to become visible. And sometimes when you already reached a point where it's a little bit, okay, you have strongly different views, sometimes that allows maybe to find a common ground somewhere else, actually, in the underlying assumptions or underlying motives, so on. Inviting new possibilities, that's a beautiful one, I find personally, because in a conversation, when you bubble hop, or generally in your life, even when you disagree on something that happened in the past, or on your analysis about something that is going on, I don't know, for example, politically in the present tense, something that can be interesting is to take a look at the future together, kind of like talking about, so what would you like to see in the world? How would you like to see change? And then oftentimes the experience that one can make is, it's easy to disagree on the past and on the present, but actually when we talk about the future, oftentimes we don't see, we don't envision the future in such different terms, because we all also come back to very basic needs that we have as human beings. And so that's an interesting field to find like common denominators in the future and in the future possibilities. Another thing that's always a good little trick is basically, ask questions that might evoke more questions. If you want to kind of like get a conversation rolling and you want to feed your own curiosity in that of the other person, and maybe you even want to talk about things you don't have the answers to, or neither of you, just try to ask questions to get into more of the question space, basically. And the next one, the last point, goes a little bit in a similar direction. Don't forget follow-up questions. That's a way to kind of not to have like a fragmented interview-like conversation when you go out to do bubble hopping with somebody, but it's more about asking a question, as we did a little bit now with the questions game in an extreme case, so to say. But by follow-up questions, we make sure we hear the answer, and then we let that answer resonate with us and kind of digest it, and then maybe there's another answer coming from that, and like that there's more of an organic flow expanding between you and the person that you're talking with. And that's that can feel much more social in a way compared to I have my 10 questions that I've prepared up front and I'm just going through my list and I don't really care what the answers are. The questions are set. So follow-up questions and resonating with what happens and with the answers, that can also be a key thing for good questions. So all of those things are not meant as kind of like a necessary requirements. They're more like suggestions and maybe hopefully inspiring hints as to how you can go about asking questions for an inspiring conversation. And Emma, if you want to lead us to the next slide. One thing that we'd like to do now, we were just, we just spent some time in the breakouts. As I understand, we will actually go back to the very same breakouts for the later exercises that we do. So you have a person in mind with whom you were in a breakout just now. Think of that person and just write down for you individually 3 questions that you'd like to ask that person later on. You'll have the occasion to use that for a dialogue later. And it can be anything. And don't necessarily try hard to make it a very good question. Just something that sparks curiosity in you. And maybe try to bear in mind some of the suggestions that we just shared in the last slide. Just try to be kind of more open, not so judgmental, don't lead the person and so on. But in the end of the day, use your curiosity to think about 3 questions for the person you will be going back to breakouts with later.
And maybe I should add that I'm going to steal, I think I'll steal Verica. Is that the right pronunciation?
Verica.
Verica.
Yes, with the,
You're going to be with me.
together.
I'm going to keep you in the main room with me because you were 3 in the group.
Yeah.
But
Perfect.
I need a bit more clarity, Pierre or Emma. So can you just in 2 sentences again say what's the aim of this play?
The aim of this play is basically, this is just preparation for a play that we will do later on. Now that we had been diving into questions, we want to make use of the moment to think of 3 good questions. And then later on, we will use that to apply a couple of other skills that we will hear about in a second. And then we go into breakouts and use the questions to have like 3 questions each and kind of an organic conversation. So that's the reason, the intention. Thanks for your question. Yeah. So take a moment, let's say maybe 2-3 minutes, but if you need a minute more, it doesn't matter, it's fine. Just, take your time, write it on a piece of paper, 3 questions that you like to answer, to ask the person that you've been in a breakout with just now. And if anything is unclear, come in, of course, anytime.
Maybe it's time to move on to, do you need more time? Can't see anybody anymore. But
Sounds good. Let's just briefly hear if anybody needs a moment more. I think then we're good.
then we're good.
Yeah.
So, so when we run these like skills practices, sometimes we put in, as I said before, many skills. Will also be, many of you come from yoga, for example, we practice some mindfulness, how to calm down, could be boundaries, could be body language, especially in physical life, real life. But today we only picked like the three main ones. Asking questions is the first one, and I'll go through the two others quite briefly because time is a little bit short, I notice. So the second skill we call listen and loop, and is about listening well, but also looping back what you heard, especially if it's a bit of a difficult, tense topic. The looping part is really important. I mean, you don't have to loop back all the time, but if there's something that's just a subject where there is tension, it's also good to make sure that you have understood correctly and that the other person feels understood. So we usually, and I always in life use Otto Scharmer's, who you are familiar with, at least some of you, his levels of listening, but we call them a bit differently. But his idea is that we can actually listen to each other on different levels. And it's interesting to notice what level you're on and also practice perhaps going deeper sometimes, and sometimes it's not necessarily. But there are some good resources for that, for actually noticing when you are switching levels and what makes you do that. And his idea is that there are 4 main levels. So the one we use most of the time is really just confirming what we already know. We are looking for confirmation of that. We hear what we already know. Very typical in an argument, for example, we tend to, oh, I knew he would say that. I can do that with my partner sometimes. Oh, knew. That's like just confirming my own point of view instead of really listening to what he is saying. Going a bit deeper, which happens, for example, in school, is that we listen for new information, for new facts, for something we didn't know before. We call it widening, a little bit more information. Going even deeper, we listen and we try to understand where the other person comes from. We try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. That doesn't happen so often in an argument or fight, but it can happen in, I think, in a conversation like we're soon gonna have. That is also like, oh, that's interesting. I guess she or he comes or they come from another background, and perhaps with their experiences, you start thinking, yeah, you can understand more, and you listen with that empathy to really hear where that person comes from. And the 4th level is a generative level, and that is where something grows. There's maybe that's common solution to a problem, something you couldn't come up with yourself, but actually grows within that conversation. So that's a generative level, making it a little simple. Just curious, what level do you think you're listening at now to me?
Myself, I'm on factual 2.
Yeah, number 2. You can actually do like, where are my fingers? 2. Yeah, 2. I think 2 is very typical in this kind of situation. Someone might feel sorry for me and be on level 3 or whatever. But yeah, it's very typical. So I think that, so that is like, when we go out in the conversation, we can also try a little bit to think about what level we are listening to at. And don't forget to loop, especially if there's a little controversial, which might not happen today. But if you were to move out to somebody who has a very different view on something, then looping is a very important part. And then the third part, which I always push, that's the sharing part. Because if you ask questions and you listen, you also have to share your own personal views, share your stories, share a bit about yourself. And it tends to be sometimes that there are people who tend to be oversharing. This one, for example, who's sitting here. And other people might be a little bit undersharing. And there's a Swedish expression called lagom. That's like in the middle. That's a pretty good place to be. Not oversharing, not undersharing. But especially if you have a conflict, it could be good, because you usually don't argue with facts. That don't work so well. It's better to tell a personal story and show a little bit of vulnerability if you are to understand each other. And that's the whole point. So the sharing is important. So I usually say that, if you aim for, which of course is not a mathematical idea, but if you aim a little bit for balancing between those 3, the listening, the asking, the sharing, between the 2 of you, if you're 2 in a conversation, and also perhaps a little bit within yourself. And I also have the idea, but I'm not sure if it's true or not. I haven't really facts behind it, but I have the feeling that we tend to be better at some, and there are room for improvement on some. Some of us are really good at listening. Some of us are really good at asking. Some of us are really good at sharing, but perhaps we could be a little bit better at another one. So then we could try to develop that skill. So let's try it. And let's practice it with each other. And now we are, well, I am not, I guess, but some of you are perhaps, close to each other already in the same bubble. So it's not going to be that kind of tense conversation probably, but perhaps you could look for something where you believe something different and you can try to discuss that. Otherwise, even if you're very close to somebody, there are always questions to be asked, and you prepared some. So ask those questions. Don't forget the follow-up questions. Listen. Try to reflect a bit on what level are you listening on. If it's a bit controversial, you probably want to loop back and share some stories. And let's do that for 10 minutes in the same groups, except that I'm going to ask Verika. In Swedish, we would say Verika probably, to stay
Vera
with,
is okay.
fine. You can teach me if you stay in the main room with me, and we can be in the main room if somebody gets thrown out. And the rest of you, I let out in the breakout rooms.
But one question, Emma, regarding the time, do you think it were possible we limited it to 5 minutes, given that
maybe we can do that.
it's almost 3:30?
Yeah, let's do that.
And would it be okay for everybody to stay until maybe like 10 minutes longer overall, or maybe until 3:45? Is that okay, just so that we can plan a little bit?
Sure.
I think we overdid.
Yeah.
A little bit time-wise.
Yeah.
3 minutes each.
5 minutes. We'll do 5 minutes discussion now and try it.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Then I let you all out. Good luck. And I'm going to stop sharing.
I received an invitation.
See if everybody, I need to help. No, there, Magda. Oh, there you are. So I was so curious. So I picked you. And you were 3 in the group.
Yes.
So I felt like I could pick one person to be with me.
I think we have many similar circles. I was also wondering to know more about you, so it's great.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was, of course, that was my first question to you. Like, especially when you said that the connecting is really around all your bubbles. And I was so curious. Please tell me a little bit more about the connecting.
Yes, this year, the whole year, I'm really trying to focus on what I want to do with my life in general, because I'm really busy with my daily job and it's frustrating me more and more. So I'm trying to see what my strong points are and what I could do in the future instead of this. And I realized that I'm really very good in connecting people, most of all, regarding their special interests and their needs and what they can give to each other, but also connecting situations and connecting needs and so demands and and offers in a way.
Lovely.
So
and you're going to do that. Are you going to do that, do you think?
Basically, I am doing it right now as well, but this is kind of my personality, so I'm just trying maybe to gain more out of it in my future jobs, let's say.
Okay.
But
who are the favorite ones if you were like to dream connection? What is that?
Dream connection would be actually to do what I love and earn for a living from that.
Really make it a profession too.
Yes, that's the most difficult as well.
Yeah,
at least here.
Yeah.
But Sweden is one of my dream countries. I've always admired Sweden. I was wondering about your circus circle. It really tingled me.
Yeah, the circus circle, as I would even say, I love that, especially coming from the business school. To me, that's outsider perspective, it's freedom, it's embodiment, it's a bit crazy. So I'm lucky enough to work with 2 different circus projects. And so I work a lot with circus artists these days, 2 different research projects, one in Europe in general. So we are a little bit all over, and one in Sweden.
Wow.
It's very rewarding. It's so nice from the suits and the kind of strict square people, and then somebody hanging upside down I need that.
That really is totally different from everything else that you do. So it must widen up your perspective.
Yeah. I think that's the same thing. Yeah, maybe that is my point. Like if you're the connecting for me, I think it's like the broadening of perspectives. That's really important.
Yes, because I also sing in a band, and our last performance before Corona started was actually vintage circus theme. So
really? But you don't have a recording of that, do you?
No, unfortunately not. It was for a company and everything. But what is circus to you, for me, is probably music. So that's kind of really connecting and bringing not only people together, but also people and emotions. Because I think that but I think it would be better if we really try to connect among ourselves and understand each other better. And probably arts is the safest.
Oops. Now you were a bit lost here, but I think that was a very interesting point too, with arts being really a connector too, and a bridging of difference. I sometimes have the feeling, now I lost you a bit, I don't know why, but probably Wi-Fi that's bad. That's also cliffhanger when you don't get to hear the end of a sentence. But for me, I was wanted to kind of, there you are. I'm filling in. I'm filling in the blanks. I'm filling in the blanks for what you start. The arts is the best.
Yes, the arts is the best a field for connecting actually, and especially, you know, here in Macedonia, just as in Sweden, there are so many different ethnicities, different backgrounds and everything. But if you focus on these things that actually bring us together, like what are the things we enjoy, and that's definitely music or film or dancing. Or, so
do you
really,
manage to bring people together from different, if you play, for example, at
yes,
the Venice?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, it's very interesting. Yes, absolutely.
It is.
And also what I loved what you said in the beginning, you know, just try to focus, try to find a similar points, even in the most tense situations. Like people tend to like to get information better from people they like, from people they think they're similar to.
Yeah.
So this is a two-way process you can work with, and that's really fantastic. I mean, I've read a lot of research about that, and I was also teaching some communication skills, and this is it. Try to mirror sometimes the person you're talking to, and then you can actually get closer and get more information.
Absolutely.
Oh, this was 5 minutes?
Yes, that's how fast 5 minutes
5 minutes
are.
are quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Allah.
How was it?
Gotta go.
You have to mute yourself.
So to make a little bit, given that we're already slightly over time, one thing that we're really, really curious about is actually, well, two things. The first thing being, what made you really curious about bubble hopping in the first place? And the second thing being, where do you think could it be helpful, generally speaking? And just feel free to jump in freely.
I have many bubbles, so bubble hopping could really be a great skill. That's what triggered me. And I think it can be very useful in the trainings that I organize and the groups that I try to manage, especially online. So thank you very much. It was very insightful. And thanks, Emma, for the nice 5 minutes. I enjoyed it very much.
So did I. Mutual. And next time we have some, I think the idea we came up with that the arts, music or circus is actually a very good way of bridging differences too. So that would be one of my answers from our conversation.
And let's hear everybody if we have the chance. Just come on in. So what made you curious in the first place, and where can it be helpful?
Can I?
Sure.
Okay, this was the question actually that I asked in the group with Maya. Actually, I didn't know. I just read a meeting with Emma, and I asked Kaneshko if I could be there. I sensed something that I should be here now. I also asked a question about how often do we listen the social field, and what he or it is telling us. So today I decided to listen to it and to see what will bring for me. Maybe I'm not aware of it now, but I'm sure that in some time, in some future time or very close future, I would be aware of it. So.
Thanks, that's beautiful. Thanks. Next person.
Okay, myself. I love the wording behind bubble hopping. So when I read when I first heard what Emma was speaking, and then I read about it, I saw the wording as a very pragmatic one, very understandable one, because I'm all into you. And that Otto's wording is beautiful also, but it is more esoteric. This one is more pragmatic, where I can see bubble hopping could be implemented is actually in overbridging divides into among groups which are most resistant to change. So it's leaders or institutions, because bubble hopping, I think, can find words that can be motivating for them to step into a bit of a change, some kind of a change. Yeah.
Nice.
Clementina?
Yes, we had conversation with Nebojša before this meeting, and my concern was when we talk about TREU for institutions or NGO sector or businesses, that it is complicated for them, and that we need to find a way how to make this methodology closer to them with easiest wording, and I found it in your approach, and thank you for that.
Thanks. You want to name the next colleague to share?
Alexandra?
Well, yesterday we had actually a short meeting with Nebojša and Marina about the hub in Macedonia. And I was shortly mentioned a challenge that I have when speaking with public institutions. And actually the advice was, when something happens, just ask questions. And yes, actually this comes right in the right moment. Like it's a great tool that that I can use, especially when I'm part of policy working groups.
Nice. Thank you. Do you want to pass it on?
Sorry, Virja, no, she already did it. Just to Magda.
For me, it was useful because we have bubbles that we really like, and then we first we paint these bubbles, but then I realized that there is some bubble that maybe now seems that they are far away. But I was thinking now after this conversation how they can come closer, because maybe they are too different from what I'm working on it now, but maybe can come closer, and maybe to maybe they can have them place there in this bubble what I'm creating, what I was creating when I show. And then it was useful this with questions, because it's funny how this curiosity can where can brings you. So from one question, another question, and who knows where we will. And there is a limit how long have to be this exercise, like how many minutes, and then it's dangerous, or it's not existing, something like that.
Not that I mean, there's no official warning, but no, yeah, thanks for that. I also saw the question before by Nebojša. I'm happy to share a link to a similar exercise that inspired us for this one. I've never seen it with more than like 4 or 5 people at once, and I think I would I think at some point it's enough, but I think you can probably easily do it like up to 10 minutes, I would say, from a gut feeling. But I've never seen it honestly like longer than maybe 5 minutes, for example. But you could do it, it depends how you do it, right? If you do it like a dialogue round where you only use questions and there's a lot of time where you let the question sink in. I mean, in theory, as long as everybody is comfortable with it, why not do it half an hour? So, you know, you can use it a little bit to your gusto. Just bear in mind that, you know, it might also be irritating to people. So maybe you want to check in if, you know, that they're still feeling fine and that the setting is all right. And let me share a link to a similar game that inspired us, which is called the Wicked Question Game. There you go. Yeah. And Emma also mentioned that there might be a couple more resources that she's happy to share. If I can ask a question, or just sharpen the question on what might be helpful, what do you think in your work, the work that you do for regarding change or you know, social impact in the widest sense, where do you think that can come in really like pragmatically helpful, so to say? Do you have a couple of things in mind, maybe, where you think, hey, that could really be a thing? Exercises like that, bubble hopping.
I think that can be really helpful when we are going to speak with, I mean, like people who are making decisions and that they are really important for us. Like maybe when they have some question, when I'm not sure if I can get the right answer and I'm curious to hear what they think, maybe I can answer with the question. But for me, you know, when I was listening this, maybe it will be helpful for my daughter, because she's all the time asking questions, and I will start to answer her with the questions. So maybe I should inspire her to think more, I mean, in the way of answering than in the way of questioning. So for me, really, it will be useful, maybe more there, but of course at my work too, because we are doing this, especially when we speak with our mentees, with our beneficiaries. We are doing this. We have even questioners who are ready and who are guide us with the process. But I will think how I can fix this, because it's something new for me. So I will need time to somehow include in my work, but I will find the place, I'm sure.
Thanks. Right, I would actually love to continue the, yeah, Nebojša, please come in.
I was waiting, maybe somebody else could say something, but I will continue. So yesterday I was on one of the U meetings, and there was a guy in my breakout room who said that a huge pharmaceutical company is taking on the U. So all of their 100,000 people are going to kind of implement it. The biggest challenge, he said, is to how to get the senior and even middle management into the process, because they're staying in this meta position, saying, okay, our workers, employees will do that. They want to do it, so let them do that. You know, and I asked him, what is the way that you have in which way you managed to actually enter such a huge company to do that? You know, he didn't give me the straight answer, but I could sense that it was by offering them, being one of the offers in their public call for retreats. Retreat, do you know the word retreat? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so what I can see the bubble hopping can do actually is to enter huge entities, big entities, whether they are institution or business, but I think mostly business wise institutions, entities, on a small door, like a Trojan horse, you know? So they want a retreat when they want to have fun and everything. So you enter with these light topics, light kind of games, and then you offer the really serious content. This is what I think is a possibility for bubble hopping in our work. Yeah.
Thanks. That's interesting. It's kind of to build relation or to bring some like easiness before, like, or in order to better tackle the tougher stuff together, the more challenging content, for example.
It's a kind of an aikido, you know. Mm-hmm. They want something, you give them that, and then you know, like offer something else more.
Okay, nice. Interesting. That's really nice food for thought. To go a bit more into that, I would really love to continue the conversation, but in the interest of time, I think Emma, I'll definitely pass it to you now. So maybe you want to have some final words.
I hate endings. That's the worst part. I put some links there. I think it didn't work to just put them in the chat, but you could download that document and it might work. Not sure. I took them from the course web. In the course I'm just running. I'll be happy to provide them later. There's actually good, I think it's, if you're interested, there's also good one of those free courses at UC Berkeley right now. One of the links go to that, and that just started, I think, a second edition called Bridging Differences. It's a super good course. I took it myself in the fall. So that is something if you want to dig deeper into it. But that's also deeper. I think the bubble hopping, And I was listening to what you were saying there too with Theory U, because we met through Theory U, and Otto has been important in the whole work. And that's how Pierre and I got to know each other in Berlin, was actually through that. And of course, it has the same basic ideas. It's just like a much more easy to use, of course, also simplified kind of starting point to get as many as possible kind of on board, I think. And then you could just, I think the thing with it is that you can just like develop and put in. Sometimes I have this flexibility. That's like the idea. And doing it in different settings, but also actually privately. Sometimes that really opens up doors too, I think. And I'm just reading research about it, but there's just some studies now about talking to strangers. I think especially with the pandemic, it's been difficult to meet sometimes outside your bubbles, especially in real life. And I think the need right now is just huge. So sometimes just like having those small little skills in mind when you go to the grocery store or whatever can be really good. Helps me. And I just hope it helps somebody else. That would be my final words. And let's keep in touch. We have tons to talk about, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much for your time today and your being wonderful, being now. If I can ask you only one question is, what do you perceive as a possible next step for us to initiate in a possible cooperation with you?
You'd be our Fika branch. We'll do something. I don't know. You'd be you and but we collaborate. We'll do something together, perhaps.
Cool. We'll just keep it open as a possibility. Yeah.
And one suggestion, if you want to make it concrete or take it further, I think one helpful thing is really to think about, one or two use cases. Maybe you have some like a community that you'd like to engage, or some questions that you'd like to bring out there. So if you think in those terms of a use case, and then think, in this context, we would really like to do a bubble hopping thing, then it's very easy for us to kind of come in and be your sparring partner in how you can do that. I think that could be a straight way forward.
Yeah.
Very concrete. Thank you, Pierre. Emma, thank you very much for convening this, for bringing Pierre in.
Yes.
Guys, unmute and say thank you in our native language.
Yes, please.
Hvala!
Благодарам.
Благодарим много.
Благодарам.
Благодарам.
Lagodaram. Nice.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
You're good with Slavic things. Good. Thank you, people. Thank you.
Danke. Vielen Dank.
Tack.
Bye-bye.
Vielen Dank.
Bye.
Schönes
Bye.
Wochenende. Have a nice
Bye.
weekend, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye bye.
Ciao.